Hello, John Knight back again. You might call me a beginner in this type of thing, but you don't learn something by standing on the sidelines. You learn by jumping in the game and playing. So um, I'm new to these podcasts, and but I really am interested in in having one. This some things I've been wanting to say since I got saved, and I'm trying to work up to saying them. Now, this is sort of an unusual thing I'm going to be talking about today, but I heard two other people talk about it on Charlie's service that they thought it was really important, and it's kind of a hidden thought. You don't hear about it much. It's not stressed in the Bible much. It's not taught much, but and it's kind of hard to understand part of it. But that doesn't mean we don't need to search out the matter and really get the deepest understanding we can of it. Now I'm gonna give a little bit of my testimony as an explanation of what I'm trying to say. I I didn't get saved until I was 40. I thought Jesus was a fairy tale that uh, preachers made up. I really did. They all kind of said the same things, and they just couldn't reach me. I was 40 before I understood what what Charlie Kirk understood at a very young age. He lived his entire life. His entire life was 9 years shorter than when I got saved. It's just totally amazes me that he could do what he did in 31 years. It's certainly amazing, and I, I really see what a more clearer than ever what a dilemma we are in the United States and all over the earth. There were people. I heard people talk about how wicked Charlie Kirk was, and everything I've ever heard him say to me was a good example of a biblical explanation. People was calling him wicked. People calling him a Nazi. People was so many people putting him down, and I was just not getting it. I couldn't get it. I couldn't see what's their objection. I've heard preachers talk about how wicked he is. A preacher. I don't get it. They must be reading a different Bible than me. Um, People celebrating his death. Well, buddy, they think about this thing a whole lot different than I do. And I think we can look at what has happened here. If we look at the response to Charlie Kirk's death and the response to George Floyd's death, there's a total difference, different response. So I'll go into that a little bit more later. But here's what I wanted to say about my own testimony. A redneck friend of mine came by one day and just passed a statement: Jesus is for real. 4 words changed my life because I remember saying back to myself, I will check this out. 5 words to me. He said 4 words to me. I said five. And when I checked it out, I found out Jesus is for real. At 40 years old, I began to understand what Charlie must have understood at 14 or maybe four. I don't know. But I sure came in late. But the way I see it, if you get in the race late, you better hit the ground running. And I really have. I'm 84 now. I've been saved over 40 years. And, Moses was a little bit advanced in years when he got cranked up. Abraham was way down the road. But I want to bring this and say this now. While I'm thinking about my age and just I'm in awe of the youth of America right now. Because when I was young, kids didn't talk about Jesus. Teenagers didn't talk about Jesus. In my whole high school, I knew maybe two families that were Christian. It's totally different now. Teenagers are really understanding in depth uh, what the gospel is saying in depth. Totally is blowing me away because I'm 84, and most of what I've seen of the youth of America is them just doing their little thumbs on that telephone, and like I wasn't seeing what I've seen lately about the depth of understanding they have of Jesus. It wasn't there when I was a teenager, among teenagers. It's there now, and I don't know how they got it, but thank God for it. Um, I'm going to tell you, I'm I'm not a historian, but I understood this about the Second World War, and when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and destroyed many of our ships and planes, we had to do a lot of building to make a comeback in strength. And at that time, I've read and I've heard that thousands of young men, 15, 16, 17 years old, would go down to the place they signed you up and say they were 18. They signed up voluntarily to go fight in that war that was horrible. And they didn't have to go. They could have stayed at home and done whatever. They didn't. They weren't of age to be drafted. They just went voluntarily. And I came up with a saying. I don't know how long ago. I write songs. I'll bring some of them out later, but for right now, I just say I can do rhymes. I come up with a saying, and I don't know when I came up with it. A number of years ago, maybe 10, maybe 5, I don't know, because it wasn't a song and I didn't go anywhere with it. But in that war, we were greatly aided by the young people that didn't have to go but went because they really wanted to. And this saying came to me a number of years ago when I didn't understand the youth of America. I had no idea. I remember one time a few years back was riding down the road and two teenagers were stranded on the side, and I stopped to see if they needed me to get them some gas, and they said no. We just don't know how to change a tire. Well, by the time I was their age, I knew how to change a tire, and I really didn't have. I certainly didn't see the youth of America like I'm seeing it now. Well, this saying came to me years ago when all I saw of the youth was mainly this and standing on the side of the road because they couldn't change a tire, and I just didn't understand. I'm not looking at them that way now. I'm looking at them like they may well have saved the United States of America from oblivion. Now, some of you may not understand that, but we were being destroyed by stupid. How stupid is it to, and maybe great debaters don't call opponents stupid, but how stupid is it to have open borders, let rapists, murderers, and enemies of the country just come in? There are families where the mother was brutally raped and murdered, and Joe let them in. Just let them in. Now I made this point once before. If a robber robs a bank, gets away with a bunch of money, and when it's investigated, they didn't know how he got in, but there was a hidden camera that noticed an employee, bank employee, let him in. When he's caught and prosecuted, they'll prosecute him and they'll prosecute the employee that let him in. Well, I don't understand why. I really don't. I'm no great thinker. I grew up in the country, but but my mind will not wrap around. Why can they put that person in jail that let the robber in, but not prosecute Joe Biden, who let people in who killed Americans? I don't get it. He walks around free. The Democrat Party did not um, say, look, we don't want him up there doing this. They just let him go. He was free to leave our borders open. And I think that the youth of America, from what I heard at Charlie Kirk's ceremony, was instrumental in getting that much stupid out of our government so that we could begin to rebuild. And so, to me, the United States of America owes a great debt to the youth. I think, as I'm seeing it now, we owe a great debt to the people whose tan's a little bit darker than mine because they are wising up, growing up, getting and moving on. And I'm telling you, I'm totally impressed with some of the wisdom I'm seeing, what they're doing. But I came up with this saying years ago when I didn't really understand the youth of America like I understand it now. Like I understand it now. To me today, this what I came up with years ago that made no sense to me then, and so I haven't shared it. I just came to me. This phrase that I truly believe I can understand it now. Didn't understand it then. Here's the phrase. Now as then, it falls on the shoulders of the young again. Because I think they're playing a big part in what's going on. But now, when I looked at the crowd at um, Charlie's service, it was many. It was many ages there. It was not just youth. It was all ages, and I've been totally impressed by the response to Charlie's death all over the world. Uh, Thousands in London. It's just amazing what is going on. Anyway, that phrase makes sense to me now. Now as then, it falls on the shoulders of the young again, but it really falls on the shoulders of everybody who understands the panoramic picture. That's a bigger picture than a big picture. The panoramic picture includes Jesus. And my goodness, did Charlie Kirk's legacy and his life is that he helped explain Jesus. I mean, he didn't call people up to debate them to show he was smarter than them. He called them up to help them understand something they didn't quite get. I'm going to read, okay, if I can find it here. Matthew 13:19. They're talking about the parable of the sower. When Jesus is talking about it, when anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, then the wicked one comes and snatches away what was sown in his heart. When he didn't understand it, and what Charlie's mission on this earth was to explain it. Was to explain it. That's what he came to do. He came to explain the gospel and did it really well. Um, Charlie's tutor, I'm quoting, I wrote his name down, Frank Turek, made this statement. The purpose of life is to know Jesus and to make him known. The purpose of life is to know Jesus and to make him known. And I think his next statement was to make heaven crowded. I don't have that wrote down, but that's how I remember it. Well, the first two uh, words in my email address, and I'm not going to give the whole address because I get more. I don't need to be inundated at this point. I may want to later, but uh, the first two words of my email address is populate heaven. Well, Frank Turek says we need to make heaven crowded. If I remember him correctly, so I think he said that. Well, I think I've known that for a long time. We need to populate heaven. And Charlie has really been great in that area. Uh, what I really, but now I made a little testimony there about what I'm leading up to. I heard this idea expressed twice at Charlie's service. The idea of our responsibility to forgive our, it was a commandment. Jesus said, forgive. It's a commandment. We have it's a commandment to those of us who are Christians. So let me say this. Um, the government has a responsibility as well as individuals, but they're different. And the difference between our response to wickedness as people is different than the government's responsibility. Now, Jesus said, forgive and you'll be forgiven. That's in various places. Matthew 6, 14 and 15 is probably the main one. Forgive and you'll be forgiven. But if you don't forgive, I'm not quoting it perfectly, but if you don't forgive, you won't be forgiven. Well, when I was about 40, a person did something to me that was terrible, and I was really angry about it. And I hadn't quite gotten saved yet. And I was so mad. One day I went down to an abandoned house down there and beat my head against it. Well, I didn't do it but once because it really hurt, but I was that angry. And then I heard, "Forgive and you'll be forgiven." It was a commandment. Well, I was just too angry to do it. I mean, I had a right to be mad. I just couldn't do it. I don't. It was 40 years ago. I can't remember every detail, but I didn't do it. I was really mad. But then I saw the consequence of it, that if I didn't forgive that individual, I'd lose my forgiveness. And I could see a lake of fire looming in the distance that I didn't want to go to. There was a consequence beside of the commandment. There was the commandment, there was the consequence. I didn't respond to the commandment. I responded to the consequence. And I've always kind of felt bad about that. Well, John, why couldn't you just have done what he said to do? Why couldn't you have done that? Well, don't quite know, but I did respond to the consequence, and I forgave that person, and it was wonderful because I could go on with my life without thinking about what happened. I could begin again. Couldn't do away with what happened, the pain of it, and so forth, but I could begin again and go on. I did forgive them. Well, I tell you, our we've been commanded to forgive those who have done us wrong. And Erica really came through on that. Here's my remembrance of what she said. She pointed out that Jesus prayed, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. She said it a little different, but that's what she meant. And then she said, and Charlie would have done the same thing, so I'm forgiving this person. She followed the commandment to forgive, and I didn't. I responded to the consequence. Well, I'm just saying all of this. I wished I could have responded to the commandment. I think it's a much better choice. But thank God I could at least respond. My whole point of making this is a consequence can change a person's behavior. A severe consequence needs to be out there in certain areas and certain times. Now, that woman that was killed on a bus, I think North Carolina, not long ago, was killed by a person who should have been in jail, in my understanding. But that Ariel was soft on crime and let him out. He shouldn't have been out on that bus to kill that woman. What you do to criminals was not a deterrent to him because they were light on him, too light. You can be too light. I mean, a government's responsibility is to be tough on crime. Now, that's different than an individual's responsibility. I'm going to read that. I hope I can, if I can find it. Where I'm just going to read it. Romans. Here's the government's responsibility to crime, to evil. Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Wish I had my glasses, I could do better. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. That shooter brought judgment on himself. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authorities? Then do good, and you will have. I don't have my glasses, sorry. But the meaning of it is that if you do evil, the government has an authority to punish you. I'm going to read the very last but that's talking about people in government. He is an God's minister to you for good if you do good. But if you do evil, be afraid. If you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. Well, that man on the roof did evil. And I don't know if he was aware of consequences or not. But there is, as we listen to the podcast and so forth, we find out there's a whole lot of people out there ain't worrying about the consequences of doing evil. They're talking about, I heard one guy say this. Those of you who talk like Charlie Kirk, you need to think about it because, you might be next. That's terrorism. That's threatening those of us who believe in our First Amendment rights. That's terrorizing those of us who believe Charlie Kirk really was on track. It's a threat. And there's a lot of people out there who believe. I made a video called a week ago called "The Real Nazi Was on the Roof." I wandered around too long on that. I think I'm going to take that down and point out this right here, I think needs to be really thought through. The government's responsibility to deal with evil. If you don't have some negative consequences, I think that's one reason there's so much crime in America. When George Floyd was killed, there was a lot. Well, there was a lot of evil went on without any consequence. Police precincts being burned, houses being burned, because that crowd was angry. But there was no response, hardly any negative response to the evil that was done. Now, the response to Charlie's assassination has been totally different. You don't see a bunch of angry people burning things up. You see a bunch of people that are sad. It's more a sad group than a mad group. Mainly the people that mourn Charlie's passing are Christians, and I'm just saying it out. I don't think a real Christian could celebrate his passing. A real Christian can't call him a Nazi. A real Christian can't say He's a racist. The preachers I've heard say he's a racist. I question how well they know Jesus. Of course, I'm not the one who decides. Jesus is the ultimate decider of who gets in and who doesn't. Um, but I'm saying that the government needs to study out its place that's spelled out in Romans chapter 13. What is the place of the government? It ain't to be nice. Listen, God has severe consequences to not obeying him. If you don't want Jesus, you don't get to heaven. If you don't want Jesus, what you got coming to you is a lake of fire and no water. That's the consequence. God has got a severe consequence to not obeying him. We need to really dwell on what's the proper response to the evil of killing somebody who has a different opinion. Because that bullet was just not in a person, it was in our First Amendment. Now, that's getting kind of fancy talking there, but what is the government's response? Maybe it's a balance between severity and mercy. Too much mercy, that when there's no response, there's a scripture, if you spare the rod, you spoil the child. If you don't punish them when they do wrong, you're not doing them no favors. And the same is true of criminals. So I think as Christians, we really need to review, revise, think about, tweak what is the real response to evil. Now, Democrats, they ain't interested in that from what I can see. It'll have to be a Republican response. But really, we're down. I see us starting a country, the United States of America, like 13 different countries who got together and said, we're going to come on with a new experiment here. We're going to do it different. And we were 13 states, but now I just see us as a divided state, and I see it good and evil. And the good mourn Charlie Kirk's death, and the evil celebrate it. I've never seen such a division. Never, ever seen such a division. I can't have much use for Democrats anymore. I'm sorry. But Joe let them in to steal, kill, and destroy. He let political enemies in, and he let rapists and murderers in. I just can't have. I don't know how we're going to work with. I don't know how we're going to work with people that celebrate Charlie Kirk's death. I'll say that. Whatever they are, I don't see how we're going to do it. How can you? To me, the people that celebrate his death, and I'm mourning it, and millions, thousands and millions of others are mourning his death because we see him as a great man. They see him as somebody they can shoot because he's got a different opinion. I don't know how we work with somebody like that. I don't know how we keep going. To me, those that celebrate his death, and this is just the way my redneck mind works, are on one side, those of us that mourn his death, we're on the other, and how we're going to work together. How is Israel going to work with Hamas? When Hamas wants to kill Israel, they went over there and killed over 1,000 of them. How can they live? How can Israel live side by side with people that want to kill them? If they're living side by side in 5 or 10 more years, they're going to be back and kill another 1,000 because that's what they want in their heart. So I went too far on the one I did last week. There was so much I wanted to say. I was really looking at the country. So many people out there celebrating the death of a man that I think that I really admire. I admire his understanding of the Bible. I understand I admire what he's done in a political arena as well as in a spiritual arena. I'm totally, I can't hardly believe that I've made up, well, this people, I can't hardly believe the people who say Charlie Kirk was wicked and a racist and celebrate his death. How are we going to work with people like that? To me, how can Israel work with Hamas? How can Israel work with Hamas? How can I work with somebody who celebrates somebody's death who's different than, whose opinion is different than theirs? We have a First Amendment that says Charlie Kirk should have been able to say anything he wanted without somebody deciding I need to kill him. To me, the evil man was on the roof. My last, um, the one I did a week ago was called "The Real Nazi Was on the Roof." The real evil, I just break it down the way I see it. It's evil people celebrate his death, and it's a different crowd on the other side. It was a beautiful crowd that celebrated his life and his service. So really, just let me say, um, it's a very strange thing. I am thinking is very important. As I'm talking, I think probably a balance is what's needed. I heard it said that years ago by a motivational speaker that a weakness is a strength carried to an extreme. And I can understand that. Say, for instance, you can make up your mind yourself. Well, that's like a strength. But if you can't be told anything at all, that's a weakness. Uh, if you're good to people, that's a strength. But if you're too good and you're like a doormat and people just walk all over you, that's a weakness. So there's a balance to be reached. And I think we need to reach that balance. Mainly, the government needs to really look at itself and its responsibility. And those of us who are members, as Americans, we need to be thinking about it too. The government has a responsibility to punish evil because if you do evil, be afraid, for the government does not bear the sword in vain, for he is God's minister and avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. So we need to really be aware of our government. They have a responsibility. I think the people in North Carolina letting that man roam the streets, I think that woman is dead. Uh, I'm thinking that they should be held liable for her death. I ought to pay for her funeral. Uh, they're just liable. They were too light on crime. I think that as Christians, as Christian people, as Christian people, we need to call for our government to get it really right and think about what's their responsibility. We're working on our responsibility. It's our responsibility as individuals to forgive people that do us wrong, but it's the government's responsibility to punish evil. So I'm saying I don't quite know the answer. I think we really need to think about it because a severe penalty, I think, will deter some people that want to go kill one who has a different opinion. It needs to be severe. I'm willing to leave it open for debate. I was leaning towards the death penalty, but a friend of mine pointed out, well, John, you didn't get saved till you was 40. What if you execute somebody when they're 20 who might would have changed his mind and gotten saved if you'd have let him live? So I don't. He kind of put a different idea in my mind about it. I think the penalty for assassination should be really severe, but I'm not positive. My friend has a right. What if you uh, execute him when he's 20, and if you'd have let him live longer, he could have come to know Jesus. I'll tell you, I think I've talked long enough. I know I talked too long last time, so I'd rather talk too short. Well, whatever. Um, I'm Listen. My pastor used to say this. He would about himself. I'm just trying to get to heaven and take a load. And you know what? That's my goal too. I'm just trying to take a load. And I think Charlie's goal, he might not have said it like that, but buddy, I think he's taking a big load. And I'm confident that he made it. And I'm confident that he's taking a big load with him. So let's pick up his mantle like Elijah picked up Elisha picked up Elijah's mantle, carried it on. I like that phrase. We are Charlie Kirk. I admire what he stands for, and I hope to be able to share in advancing what he really believed. Think he's a great man. I'm just going to call it a day before I wander too far, before I just drag it on. God bless, and God bless America.